It was pouring rain outside. I stood at the door of the house where my wife's lover lived. She had spent 11 years with him, which were also the years of our marriage. I wanted to come face to face with the man who I felt had destroyed my family. I had all the divorce papers and the proof I needed. However, when I knocked, I realized I had made a huge mistake. I never considered myself lucky, but by the time I was 28, I had achieved significant success and owned my own business. My life changed dramatically after meeting Elizabeth. It happened at a charity event that my friends had persuaded me to go to. She was a volunteer and her smile immediately charmed me. "Do you go to these events often?" I asked, approaching her. The question seemed silly, but I was just shy. "Yeah, I like being here. Do you?" Her eyes sparkled with interest. "This is my first time here, but it seems like I'll be here more often now," I replied, smiling. We spent the rest of the evening talking about everything. The conversation flowed so naturally and casually, as if we had known each other for years. By the end of the evening, I didn't want our conversation to end. "Why don't we meet for coffee tomorrow?" I suggested. "I wouldn't mind," she said with a smile. From that evening, I started courting her, trying to meet up every chance I got. I'd been in relationships before, but they'd all ended badly when it came to marriage. But Elizabeth was different. After Elizabeth said yes, I realized that my dream had come true. We were busy preparing for the wedding and building our house. I had a lot of help from my older brother Steve, who was in the Army. It wasn't just a house, it was our family nest that we put all of our love and dreams into. When our first child was born, I felt like the luckiest person in the world. Elizabeth was a wonderful mother, and every day I admired her. "Do you think he looks like me?" she asked one day, holding our newborn son in her arms. "Without a doubt, he has the same eyes," I replied, looking at him with incredible tenderness. Then our daughter was born, and our family grew even stronger. I remember us painting her room in light colors, choosing furniture, and decorating her little world. Those moments were so joyful that I couldn't imagine a different existence. Life flowed, filled with children's laughter, family dinners, and warm evenings by the fireplace. I ran my business and contributed significantly to the family's well-being, striving to keep us strong and steadfast. Elizabeth took over the raising of the children while I worked. Sometimes she would leave the children with her parents to do her own thing. She went to fitness classes and swam in the pool once a week. But over time, I began to notice a strange change in Elizabeth's behavior. She used to be excited for me to come home, but one evening her greeting went cold. When I came home, full of news about my day, her reaction changed. "Imagine, I had to fire a guy today," I began, but she only glanced at me and continued flipping through her phone. She mumbled absent-mindedly without looking up. "That's great." I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe she was just tired or worried about something. But when moments like this started happening again and again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Elizabeth, is everything okay?" I asked one day, trying to look her in the eyes. "Yeah, sure, just tired," she replied, but her voice sounded distant. It was getting hard for me. I noticed that Elizabeth was starting to spend less time with the children. The house was slowly falling into disrepair. She had always been active and caring, but now she didn't seem to care. There were days when I would come home and find the kitchen in disarray, dinner not ready. Once I even found burnt soup on the stove while she sat absorbed in her phone. This was not her style. I tried to talk and find out the reason for this change, but every attempt to start a conversation ended with her guffawing or assuring me that everything was fine. The decision to hire a detective didn't come to me right away. Before taking this step, I scoured internet forums and analyzed my wife's behavior. Most of the signs pointed to infidelity. I sought advice from an old friend who had recently gone through a divorce after his wife had an affair with a neighbor. I trusted his judgment, and he provided me with contact information for a private investigator he described as a professional in his field. "Are you sure you want to do this, John?" he asked when I sought his advice. He had been through a difficult divorce and expressed his sympathy for me. "I just want to make sure I have peace of mind," I replied, realizing I had no other choice. I worked almost every day, so I couldn't follow my wife personally, and she didn't share anything with me. The meeting with the detective took place in a small cafe. He was a serious and focused man, listened attentively without interrupting. "I understand how difficult this is for you," he said when I finished the story. "I'll do my best." We discussed the details, and I gave him all the information he needed. Pictures of Elizabeth, her schedule, her phone number. He promised to act discreetly and promptly. I gave the detective an advance without reservations. How soon should I expect news? I asked as I said goodbye. Give me a couple of weeks. I'll get back to you as soon as I have something concrete, he replied. We shook hands. Returning home, my main and perhaps most important task was to remain calm and not arouse suspicion. The months stretched on incredibly slowly. Every day I could feel myself slowly going insane. I waited for a call from the detective, and when he finally called, my heart raced in anticipation and fear. We have something to discuss. Can we meet at the same cafe? His voice sounded neutral, but I sensed the news was going to be serious. When I arrived for the meeting, I found him sitting at a table with a large folder. His face was focused, and I realized I was in for a tough conversation. John, I've gathered enough material to give you a clear picture of the situation, he began, opening the folder. In front of me were photos, videos, audio recordings, and 5 sheets of text detailing every move my wife had made over the past month. The most shocking was a video of my wife having sex, and my worst fears were confirmed. What I didn't expect was that my wife's lover would turn out to be my older brother, Steve. Steve was a military man with no family. He spent all his money in bars and on women, traveled around the states, being transferred from one base to another. The last time I saw him was years ago, at our father's birthday party, and I had no idea he was back in our town, as no one had informed me. I felt the world around me begin to crumble, seeing the evidence of betrayal. It was unbearable. My heart filled with bitterness and pain. How long do you think this went on? I continued, my voice shaking as I asked. Based on the evidence, a few months, but really, I think a couple years, if not more. The detective explained that they were acting like experienced lovers. Your wife left no evidence and was very careful, indicating the length of their relationship. If it's any consolation, your wife's encounters with your brother Steve, judging by her behavior, are not pleasurable for her. Perhaps there's more here than meets the eye, the detective replied. I sat in the cafe, trying to gather my thoughts. I didn't know what to do next. Everything seemed pointless. How could I face Elizabeth and look her in the eye knowing the truth? How could I talk to my brother after such a betrayal? What do I do now? I asked the detective, but realized I had to find the answer myself. He sighed, it's up to you, but if I were you, I would discuss things with your wife since you have all the evidence. You can confront her and maybe you'll learn something important. I thanked the detective and left the cafe. As soon as I entered the house, Elizabeth sensed something was wrong. Her gaze was questioning, but at the same time it expressed concern. Can we talk? My words sounded heavy, and I felt my throat constrict. I'm sorry, but I'm busy, she said, even though she was just sitting on the couch looking at her phone. The kids were already asleep. I don't care, we need to talk, I said firmly. I pulled out the evidence folder and tossed it on the coffee table. Her hands trembled slightly when she saw it. What's this? Her voice sounded strained. Evidence of your betrayal with my brother. The words came out sharper than I expected. Elizabeth froze for a moment. A heavy silence hung in the room. John, she began, but fell silent, as if she didn't know what to say next. Her face changed quickly. She looked guilty, as if her parents were scolding her for yet another bad grade in school. How could you? My frustration and anger made my voice shake. I trusted you more than anything. We were building a family together. How could you do this behind my back? Elizabeth lowered her eyes. Her hands clutched the edge of the tablecloth. I didn't know how to tell you. It started out so innocently, and then things got out of control, she said. My laughter sounded bitter. Infidelity is never innocent, I said. She continued, it happened a few days before our wedding. I was at a party with the girls. There was a lot of alcohol, and your brother was there too. She paused for a moment, then continued, he was drinking and flirting with me, slapped me on the butt. I was completely lost in the moment, and then, literally in the blink of an eye, I woke up the next day next to him in some hotel room. I listened to her intently, trying to figure out how that could have happened. This was 11 years ago. I was shocked to learn all this after so many years. After the wedding, when I was busy at work, he started blackmailing her. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid it would ruin our family. Ruined you, Elizabeth admitted. But literally after a couple weeks, he left and we started building our lives. Steve pushed me away, and I thought it would never happen again. But every year when he came back from business trips, the first thing he did was head to my place. While he was in town for a couple weeks, I was forced to fulfill his needs. Now he's back and has been living in the city for a couple months now, terrorizing me. Elizabeth struggled to get the words out. She was crying and I felt sorry for her. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" I asked, even though deep down I knew the horror she was going through. "I was afraid of losing you, our family," Elizabeth began. "I thought I could somehow fix it, but I was wrong." Her voice shook with tears. "I felt like I missed the exact moment I cheated on you at that party. I felt like I could never admit it to you." The conversation was difficult. Learning the details of cheating from the person I loved was unbearable. But at the same time, I could see the genuine remorse and pain in her eyes. "I need time to realize all this," I finally said after she finished. "I don't know if we can ever get back what we had. But I promise to think about what we should all do moving forward," I continued. She nodded, unable to utter a word. I stood up and left the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts and guilt. I ran out of the house, full of anger not only at her, but at myself and at my brother who was playing a part in this treacherous game behind my back. I decided I had to confront him face to face to find out why he had done this to me. Elizabeth had informed me where Steve was staying temporarily, so I headed straight there. He was staying in the dorm, which I thought was odd considering he had decided not to stay with our parents. When he opened the door and saw me, his expression instantly changed. He realized I knew the truth. "What are you doing here?" His voice was strained. "You owe me an explanation," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Are you drunk or something?" Steve said. He was twice my size and I made an incredibly stupid decision. I looked into his stupid face and, unable to contain myself, I punched him in the face with my fist. It turned out to be a terrible idea. Within seconds I was on the floor and his massive body was on top of me, beating me mercilessly across the face. He seemed to lose all control and continued beating me mercilessly. I don't know how long it went on, but I passed out a couple times. Several guys and a hostile receptionist, attracted by my screams, dragged Steve away from me. I was totally confused as to what was going on. I just lay there and couldn't move. Then an ambulance came and took me to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctor informed me that I had a second-degree concussion. I needed to stay under observation. I felt dizzy and very nauseous. My face was swollen and I was seriously injured. That same night, the police came to the hospital to take my statement. I didn't lie and told them the whole truth, how the fight started and how Steve beat me up, causing complications. I filed a report against Steve. During the trial, I was under medical supervision. I also received stitches for several cuts on my face. Elizabeth came to see me at the hospital that night, leaving the children with their parents. She showed concern and cared for me for 3 days until I was discharged. When Elizabeth and I returned home, I didn't bring up the subject of her cheating. 3 days later, I was still having nausea and headaches. I didn't expect the meeting with my brother to end this way. If I had known how he would turn out, I never would have gone to see him. But I had a good reason for the meeting. As soon as we got home, I went into the living room to grab the divorce papers from the closet. However, when I opened the closet, the papers were not there. I turned around and looked at Elizabeth. "Where are the papers?" I asked. She just nodded her head, showing that she didn't know what I meant. "We need to talk," I began as we sat down across from each other. Her gaze was full of concern, but at the same time it was drenched in hope. "I realize that you found the divorce papers and hid them, and now you're trying to convince me that you have no idea where they are. Your love for me may have awakened, and I'm grateful for your concern while I was in the hospital. I appreciate that. But how can I trust you going forward if you continue to deceive me on such important matters?" "John," Elizabeth began, but I held up my hand, stopping her. My voice sounded tired but firm. "I can't go on like this. Too much has changed between us, and I can't seem to forgive cheating. It's better for both of us to divorce." Elizabeth turned pale. I saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "I knew it," she whispered. "I was so afraid of it, but I understand you. I apologize for everything I've done. I never meant to hurt you." We both sat in silence for a few minutes, immersed in our thoughts and feelings. It was hard to realize that our marriage, built on love and trust, was ending like this. I'm glad you understand, but it's going to be hard for me to live under the same roof with you after everything I've learned, I continued. I understand that you wanted to portray yourself as a victim, but there was nothing stopping you from talking to me. My feelings for you are gone. I'm sorry if that sounds hurtful and hurtful. Elizabeth cried and handed me back the divorce papers she had signed voluntarily. I didn't want to ruin Elizabeth's life because I knew she would have to raise 2 children. I would help with money and time, but now I wouldn't always be around. I moved into a hotel for a while and lived there. I hired a lawyer to sue Steve. I wanted to punish him. I saw a doctor every week and he checked my health. Not everything was okay after Steve's beating. My eyesight got worse, which forced me to buy lenses. I had high intracranial and blood pressure causing constant headaches and fatigue. I found it difficult to concentrate on anything. Sometimes when I drove my car, I felt nauseous. All these facts were recorded in my medical book, and soon these documents were presented in court as evidence. The trial was scheduled 2 months after the accident. Through the efforts of my attorney, Steve remained in custody during this entire period as I was genuinely afraid of him. Steve complained about me to our parents, claiming that I was trying to put my own brother in jail, but I wasn't interested in my parents' opinion. I was afraid to reveal the true circumstances to them, so I put off having this conversation. During the trial, my attorney presented evidence of a significant deterioration in my health after the assault. My face was still sore and slightly swollen, even after 2 months. Surveillance footage was also shown in court, showing Steve hitting me nonstop for 3 minutes. He was behaving like an unstable person, which was especially aggravated by the fact that he was a high-ranking military officer, and such behavior is unacceptable for a member of the military. As a result of the trial, Steve was sentenced to pay me substantial compensation, a fine, and a 2-year prison sentence. Divorce proceedings followed. We both agreed to a divorce by mutual consent. I left Elizabeth the house and her car, and the children stayed with her. We agreed that I would visit our children every week and pay child support. I had doubts about their origins, so I insisted on a DNA test. The test results were a relief in a way. After the divorce, I bought myself a small apartment and continued to run my business. My parents stopped communicating with me, blaming me for their son ending up in prison, but I didn't feel guilty. However, 4 months after Steve's incarceration, my parents persuaded me to visit him to try to mend the relationship. I agreed to make this concession for the sake of peace with my parents. We met Steve in the prison's common room, where there were large metal tables and chairs welded to the floor. Steve sat across from me. We stared at each other in silence for several minutes. "You ruined my family," I managed to say, trying to keep my emotions in check. He didn't respond, just looked at me with regret and shame. I hoped he would try to explain something to me. I wanted him to talk. Started reminiscing about our childhood, how good we were together, how we played, and how the distance between us grew over time. Steve listened intently, showing that he cared about our relationship. Finally, he spoke his first words, "I'm sorry, bro." Afterward, Steve confessed that he was the reason girls left me when it came to marriage. He intentionally slept with my women and then blackmailed them because he didn't want me to have a happy life. He was jealous of my success in building my own business and the fact that I was always surrounded by many women. He also told me how he blackmailed Elizabeth and how she almost killed herself, but he talked her out of it by portraying himself as a hero. I couldn't take it. I spat in his face and said, "If you're jealous, keep your envy to yourself." That was the end of our conversation and the end of the story. Please write your opinion in the comments about this story. We will be interested to read it. Also, don't forget to put a like and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new, no less interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely answer you personally.